I wanted to start by giving you a little bit of a geography lesson. So I am from the University of Lincoln, but not this Lincoln. And I am do have an American accent because I have a dual passport, but I'm based in England at the University of Lincoln. And one of the things that when I was telling my colleagues that I was coming out here to do this, they were like, oh, Lincoln, Nebraska, that's the place that always comes up first when you Google University of Lincoln. So I just wanted to point out a couple of things that even though the University of Nebraska in Lincoln was chartered before us in 1869, we have a cathedral that was consecrated in 1092. So we have a little bit more history. But I'm based at a research unit within the university, which is called the Lincoln Institute for Agri-Food Technology, or LIAT. And we're based on a 400-acre farm where we have a lot of different kinds of things. So it's been interesting for me to see what's going on in this community. I have a background in AI and robotics, so I'm not a plant person, but we have our research institute is interdisciplinary. So we have a group of sort of AI robotics people. We have a group of plant science, crop science, weed science, agronomy people, and we have a group of social scientists. And our overall mission is looking at finding ways to sort of rethink agriculture using technology to help promote sustainability and forward agriculture for the next generations. And so what we realize is in order to have you have the agri side and the tech side, but you really need the social science side to look at the policy and economics in order to make sure that the solutions that you come up with in the research labs are going to actually be practical for real-time, real-world deployment. So we do a lot of different things. We have, I think, a pretty broad cross-section of research activity, given our size in terms of the number of staff members. And we do welcome visitors, so anybody who wants to come and spend some time with us in the UK, please come find me later this week, or you can follow up with email. So today I'm going to talk about some of the research that we're doing on a particular project which we call Miscanthus AI. It's focused on using, sort of bringing together some in-field imaging, some genotype work, and looking at how do you make decisions, how do plant breeders make decisions about the ways to increase the biomass for Miscanthus, which is an energy crop. So I'll talk a little bit about it. Now, I wanted to start by saying, as I mentioned, I'm the AI roboticist person on this team. And so I tend to focus on the things that are on the left-hand side of this chart. So look at data collection, look at data analysis, and then sort of hand everything over to the plant people and say, okay, you guys are the plant people. You can make the decisions and decide what actions you're going to take, and I'm not going to worry about it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the left-hand side just to give you an idea of some of the data that we are collecting and the kinds of things that we're doing. But then actually the thing I'm going to focus on, the novelty, I think, is the plant breeder decisions and the way that we're bringing some kinds of elements of AI into that column. I'm just too short for this microphone, so sorry if I'm sort of out of breath on my toes here. Okay, so the crop that we're using is Miscanthus. It is, so you probably all know more about this plant than I do because you're the plant people, but it originated in Southeast Asia. These are some plots that we're growing some in Lincoln, which is on the east side of the UK, and our primary collaborator on this project and the lead investigator is at University of Aberystwyth, John Doonan. Some of you may know John. And so some of our images come from Lincoln, and some of our images come from some sites they're running, they're growing in Aberystwyth. These are the Lincolnshire sites. And it shows the images that we took from UAV over a number of periods of time. If you're familiar with this crop, you know that it will grows very fast and it will senesce fairly quickly. It's a hardy crop, and it's because this project is funded by a program that's focused on AI for net zero. We're looking at this this crop that has high biomass. So we're doing in-field data collection. My group is looking at using UAVs and UGVs, and these are some of the equipment that we're using. So we have a DJI drone for doing the UAV stuff. It's got a MikaSense Red Edge multispectra camera, and it also has LiDAR on it. And then we have ground-based, which we have a robot that we have on we have an arm, cameras on the arm with the robot driving around in the field. And we've experimented with taking data with RealSense and with stereo cameras to see where we get some better data. So some of the tricks that we're looking at with the UAV processing is looking at, okay, so we'll get sort of this point cloud data. And what we really want to know with the Miscanthus is we want to be able to estimate the height, so we can estimate the density of the plant and the volume for biomass. So we really want to be able to look at the height. And so one of the things that we had to do early on was look at, you can't actually just take the raw height from the UAV, because you have to take into account the ground, the height of the actual ground, so the terrain. So if the plot is growing a bit on a hill, you have to make sure that you're subtracting out where the terrain dips down. So that's what we're doing. That's that corrected for the terrain on the, I do this? No, I don't know how to do that. Anyways, I'm not very competent with this device. Okay, so anyway, so that's the UAV data. Then the UGV data I mentioned, so we've got this robot arm, and this is a very small sample crop that we have growing in the garden part of our farm, where we can do some very controlled experiments and look at things very closely. So normally, as you can tell from like these plots, the Miscanthus grows very closely together. And so if you want to have a ground-based robot actually take images of it, you can really only get around on the edge of it. You can't, they're too closely packed in, so you can't get them too close together. So the nice thing about our little experimental plot here is we're just growing one row, so you can get around and we can do some experiments. And what we're trying to do is build some 3D reconstruction of the plant. So with the sort of long-term aim of being able to have a 3D model, so that the agronomists can just need to go out to the field as often as they do and get some of the sense. Of course, it's still fairly crude, but that's what we're doing at the moment. And then the main trick is to basically put together the UAV and the UGV data so that we can use the data that we get around the edge of the field from the UGV, pair that with the UAV data, and then use that as a way of interpolating what might be going on at the ground level within the inner part of the field where you can't get the robot inside. So this is some of the things that we're doing. One of the things, maybe is this where's the button for there we go, yay, okay. So you can sort of see here, one of my postdocs came up with this. Basically, it's a 3D quadrat. It's a little bit hard to see, but it's got some red balls on it of different heights. So we're using those as key points to be able to match frames from the UAV and the UGV and use that to build this 3D model that you can zoom around in, which is sort of a very first cut there. So they'd probably be annoyed with me if my postdocs knew that I was showing this here, because it's just really hot off the press. But I wanted to give you an idea of some of the stuff that we're doing with this. Okay. And then once we've collected all the data and processed it, you do sort of standard data mining, machine learning kinds of things, looking at, detecting, classification, segmentation. Estimation is the key thing that we're doing for this project, because we want to estimate the volume of the biomass, as I mentioned. So none of this is new. It's just sort of standard stuff that we're doing. And here's a little bit of the examples. So we're doing this both with the UGV and the UAV data. The UAV data is interesting because this is the Aberystwyth field. This is where we get the data from more genotypes. In the stuff in Lincoln is a smaller set of genotypes. So we'll be able to look at some of the variation from the different genotypes, which we feed back to the plant breeders. So now I want to get to what's hopefully the more interesting part of the talk, which is this third column that I mentioned here. So the plant breeder decisions. Okay, and a lot of the research that I've done in my career is looking at AI decision making, which is actually not machine learning. So I'm going to talk about this. So we started by looking at what are the things that plant breeders might say. This is the example from Miscanthus, and so they might say different things about, well, it's more important to focus on yield than on disease resistance, and other people might say it's more important to focus on disease resistance as opposed to yield, depending on what your environment is, what your priorities are. So we interviewed a lot of plant breeders, and we're still interviewing plant breeders. So anybody who wants to provide input to our project, again, feel free to follow up with me because we'd be happy to have a conversation with you. So we sort of took all this information from plant breeders, and they were like, okay, how can we help this feed this into our AI decision engine? And we look at, well, what are the things that AI people say? And so there are people who are sort of above a certain age, like me. When we started studying about AI, machine learning was a very tiny piece of AI, and AI has is much bigger than just machine learning, and much bigger than deep learning. There's a whole areas of AI around planning and reasoning and problem solving, knowledge representation, and a lot of other aspects of AI. So I kind of jump up and down. I won't rant about that here, but I just wanted to point this out because I wanted to show you that some of the things that we're pulling together about reasoning under uncertainty, planning and reasoning, these all feed into decision making. So we look at how can you use AI for making decisions. So AI is good at doing things like making statistical predictions, but AI isn't perfect. AI doesn't have common sense, and AI is only as good as the structure, the data that feeds it, and the methods that train it. So you have to be really careful in terms of how you use AI and how you use the output coming from AI. And note that, not all AI is data-driven. So I think a lot of what I've been seeing here is very neat applications of deep learning and data-driven AI, but there's some other sides to it. And I could give a whole seminar on that, which I won't. But these are some of the areas of AI that you can use for sustainable agriculture, which is the sort of wider part of what we're doing on our research center. So we look at, monitoring crops, modeling crops, adapting behavior to how things change, and problem solving. So this kind of decision making in terms of how do you improve things because you want to increase yield, or do you improve things because you're more worried about disease resistance? And of course, they're going to go hand in hand to some extent anyways. But these are some of the kinds of things that we're bringing together. Now, the key technology that we're using for our decision-making is a formalism called computational argumentation. Computational argumentation has its roots in philosophy and social science. It's originally a model of how people reason. And I do spend time going to conferences on computational argumentation, which is very theoretical. There are not many people in the world that are actually implementing computational argumentation for real-world applications, and not many are doing that within the agriculture domain. So we're one of the few groups doing that. But here's a very simple sort of coverage of what argumentation does for you. So what argumentation provides is a way of structuring evidence for and against certain conclusions. So you have the support for something, and you have attack against something. It's often modeled as an argument graph, and it can be used to model sources of information, so maybe how much trust you have in a source of information. A while ago, we did some research looking at, well, it's not just enough to model the source of information, but you have to look at what is the context of the information that you're getting. So you might have a trusted source that could tell you really good things about soybeans, but they're going to tell you crap about sugar beet. So, then the source might be great for one context, but not for another context. And so some of the complexities that you can model within argumentation would let you do that kind of thing. But at an argumentation conference, you'd be looking at lots of things like this and like sort of formal statements like this, but much more complicated. And I know I'm standing between you and coffee, so I'm not going to bore you with that. But let's come back to the slide that I showed you earlier that said these are the things that plant scientists, plant breeders might say. And now I've structured it using an argument graph. So here I say, okay, so you have one group of people that say, well, they want to breed for disease resistance over yield, and an opposing group that wants to breed for yield over disease resistance. And these are some of the evidence, the reasons why you have yield over disease resistance, and these are some of the reasons why you have disease resistance over yield. Okay, and you can see that there's not going to be a single right answer. This is one of the things I really like about argumentation, is because if there was a single right answer, then we just have a basic rule-based AI and it would be done. And to me, that's kind of boring. So I want to do something that is much more difficult and that has a lot of subtleties around it. And there's not going to be a single right answer depending on the farmer, depending on the context, the climate, the financial climate. The answer is going to be different. And so you want to be able to build a system that will let you deal with those kinds of real-world flexibilities. So we've built this little decision support tool. It's in a very prototype stage. And this is what our little interface looks like. So basically, you can select what crop you're using, and the knowledge representation that we've built is supposed to be sort of generic enough that you could use it for other crops. Because of our funding for this project, we're just looking at Miscanthus, but the idea is you could select different crops. You could say, what are the kinds of things that you want to improve? So do you want to improve yield? Do you want to improve disease resistance? What's the location? Because again, depending on where you are in the world, your priorities may be different and the rules may be different because climate's different and terrain is different, et cetera. And then you can step through some different things that say, okay, well, if I have disease resistance being important, this is why. If I have yield being important, this is why. And so I can set my priorities here. I've got disease resistance over yield, but you can reset your priorities using a screen like this. So it just gives you a little bit of an idea. And this is designed to run on a tablet, and it's designed so that we would get input from the breeders as well as input from the fields to be able to feed into what's the right set of information to provide the breeder as you're doing this decision making. So just a quick summary. I think I'm doing okay for time. So we're doing some in-field data collection with UGVs and UAVs and trying to fuse some 3D models that will help breeders not feel they need to go to the field as often as they do now. We're well aware that a lot of times breeders need to touch the plant, especially with Miscanthus. They want to see, how spongy it is and that kind of thing. So that's another project with, tactile sensing on soft robots, but I'm not going to talk about that today. But we always have to start somewhere. So these are some of the things that we're looking at. And then the thing that I think is probably novel for the community here is the application of computational argumentation to this kind of decision-making where there's not one single clear answer. The key challenges with the argumentation part are knowledge acquisition and knowledge representation, because every plant breeder you talk to is going to tell you something a little bit different. And so how do we put that together? And that's where the idea of this argument graph is really helpful, because you can model the different inputs from different people and show where are things that are conflicting and where are the things that are supporting things that other people say. The other thing that's a challenge is that the knowledge represented is obviously highly specialized for each crop. So if you want to scale this for different crops, you need to change some aspects of the data set. Now, some things may stay the same and some things, will be different. So, ask me next year when we've gotten more funding for a different crop. But right now we're just looking at Miscanthus with this. I'm going to close with a couple of shout outs for some projects that I'm involved with. So I know that there's been some presentations here from people representing different networks. In the UK, you may be familiar with Phenom UK, which is it's a plant phenotyping network, also connected with Emphasis. So we have a new one in the UK called AI Bio, or UK AI Bio, which has recently been funded. I'm chair of the steering group. It's led by Andy French in Nottingham and Ryer in Aberystwyth. And it's the key thing with AI Bio is that we're bringing in the AI parts, who's not just plant phenotyping, which obviously is using a lot of AI. But there's also bringing AI people into the same network. So it's funded by UK government agency, but there is interest in international collaboration. So anybody who wants to know more about that, the website for that is here. And the final thing is we have a new doctoral training center, which is focused on AI for sustainable agriculture. So a number of people mentioned they're working with undergraduates. We are accepting applications for next year's entry, 2025, for a fully funded 4-year fellowships for PhD students. So if you have anybody who's interested, come talk to me. I'm a deputy director, and then here with a colleague who is the director of this center. So thank you. And I'll just, any questions? Just also want to acknowledge my postdocs in blue, who are the ones who've done actually the real work here, and the other colleagues on the Miscanthus AI grant. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Sklar, for sharing your cool research work. Questions for Dr. Sklar?
Thank you. Very interesting work. Just maybe adding a bit more to that breeder discussion to maybe add to the confusing thoughts. So breeders, we often, we think in terms of an ideotype, right, which may not necessarily be readily found in the field in one cycle or one field season, but that's in creative mindset. That's what we try to aim for, right? And it often doesn't come in the form of an ideal of a line, like I said, but it comes in the way of thinking of the identification of parents that have complementary traits that then build towards the formation of that ideotype. So I'm just wondering, in that this development process, was there any discussion, or what's your insight in that regard?
So I'm not sure I completely understood what the question was.
Well, the question is, how does the platform integrate the identification of traits that are complementary for genotypes to be used as parents, rather than the identification of progeny?
So that would have to do with how the data is fed into the system. And so we have the collaborators in Southampton are doing the work on the genotype data, and then we're linking that with the visual data that we get from the different cameras. And so the analysis works that's looking at what are the elements, what are the features of the images that you can correlate to the different genotypes. That's where we would look at, what's the derivative from one genotype from a parent to a child. Okay.
I have a question about how you address that this is the perennial grass, and 3 first years Miscanthus needs to establish, so number of the shoots will be different from year to year, and then somewhere around 10 years, 15 years, for some hybrids, the middle of the plant is empty, and only on the edge the new shoots are coming. Are you looking for that? And also another question you didn't mention in this breeding, let's say the study connected with the breeding, on what species do you put your efforts? If they are the inter-species hybrids, or this is Miscanthus sinensis, what is the material on which you work?
So unfortunately, I'm the AI person, not the plant scientist, so I'm not sure I can answer. The project's been running for about 1.5 years, so we haven't hit the issue of, that you've mentioned about sort of 15 years down the road in terms of the how the plant senesces over time. But I'm happy to connect you offline with the plant scientists on our team who may be able to answer your question. Sorry.
Do you follow up a question? Do you focus on the traits like emerging, the time, or are you only focusing on the how many shoots you get, in the, let's say, middle of the season?
We have all of that data in the system, so it's just depending on, what are we're looking for correlations, and then to be able to let the plant breeders decide which correlations are helping them identify the kind of actions that they want to take.
So how early are you starting the phenotyping in the field? As early as the first shoots are coming, or you're waiting longer?
No, we start from emergence. We start taking images from, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. How are arguments weighed in the computational argumentation? Are they weighed equally? If you have one argument that's for and one argument that's against, but
right. So
are they equally? Are they equal in the sense of arguments?
They don't have to be weighted equally. That's one of the things that the user can tune. And one of the things when I mentioned we look at sort of the source of the information, you might say, well, here's two sources and there's one source that I think is more reliable. So I might trust the information from that source more than information from another source. So then you can temper the weight of an argument based on what that source is. It's the user can do that balancing.
So the user defines reliability?
So the user can tweak it, yeah. So, yeah.
And is it like, are users also, so then the next question is, are users, how are users weighed? Are you weighing users? Is one user more important than the other user?
We're not weighing users.
Okay.
Users can see what the information is. So they would see, let's see if I can go back. So like this, they would be able to see this kind of information. We have different ways of showing this. And the full database is much bigger and more complex than this slide. But you could, as a user, drill down and oops. Wrong button. You could read these different things and say, okay, well, actually, I don't agree with this piece of evidence, so I'm going to reduce the importance of that one. Or you might just say, well, I know the source of each of these arguments, and this source I think is really reliable, and this source I think is a bit sketchy. So I'm going to take everything from this source and weight it less than everything from this source, for example. So different users have different levels of tolerance for how much detail they want to drill down into, and so the idea is that because there's no single right answer, you're going to get different preferences from different people in terms of whether the kind of thing that they're looking for, you want them to start with something that they know the answer to themselves, so that they can basically effectively train the system, not in the machine learning way, but train the system to be giving answers that they feel comfortable with and that they rely on, so that when they get new information, then they can feel comfortable with that answer that's provided. Okay.
Thank you for the presentation. I have two questions. Number one is, how much of foundational data set is needed to reproduce this? Then number two, do you have consideration for simulation, like you deriving crop improvement parameters for simulation to improve the system?
So the first question about how much engineering is required. So in terms of knowledge engineering, you need a fair amount of knowledge engineering because we start with an empty system. And this is the first time we've applied computational argumentation to plant phenotyping. Now, if we move on to another project, suppose we get a project funded about wheat, which is another big crop in the UK, we could look back at what are the things from Miscanthus that seem relevant and port those and be sort of like a transfer learning kind of concept where we'd say, well, what are the things that we learned from the Miscanthus project that would carry over to wheat? And then what are the things that are irrelevant and we get rid of them? So you wouldn't have to start completely from zero. but there is a fairly substantial knowledge engineering aspect to it. Sorry, I forgot your second question.
My second question is there any
Simulation, yeah.
computer
right.
simulation
Yeah.
deriving crop improvement parameters to be fed into simulation?
Right. So, sort of a longer answer to that, but I'll start by kind of saying, well, there's visualization and there's simulation. So what we're trying to do with this, I come back to here. With this, we're trying to basically build a full 3D reconstruction of visualization of what's currently in the field. So we're not trying to predict anything. We're just trying to build a representation of what's there. Okay. Now, from sort of where I come from, simulation implies being able to kind of forward predict what might happen next. And we're not looking at this with the current project, but you could think about, well, if I'm building, because obviously we're taking data multiple times a year, so we could build a time series of what happens over time, and we could take this representation of, how this was, this was taken last week. So how was this image, what's going to happen with that in 6 months, and then simulate that forward. We're not doing that at the moment, but you could do that. So, I think what we want to be able to get to at this point is something where this, which I said, like, it looks kind of crude, and we want to be able to get this so that you could imagine as a plant breeder being able to zoom in. This is just a screenshot from a program that'll give you sort of 3D visualization where you can zoom in and out and you can pan around. And if you're a plant breeder and you're spending days and days, especially in the UK where it's cold and dark and rainy and wet, and you don't want to be going out to the field all the time, if you can get some images like this that'll save you some trips out to the field, then it will be a useful thing. So can we get the fidelity of that good enough so that they feel confident that they can go out there? That would be a first step. So I want to get to that. I want to be able to visualize what we're doing, what we see now, before trying to then go, we can forward predict that. We have the technology to forward predict it, but I think we need to get to a better trust level here. Okay.